Alright guys, today we're back and we're going to be doing something called armor schemes. I said I would talk about armor and armor schemes the last video, so we're going to do it this time. It's probably going to be a shorter video than the other ones. If you haven't noticed, that gun got changed. I didn't like how it looked, and even now I kind of don't like it, but I wanted to make it look better. So we're going to talk about armor. There's two different aspects you should know to armor. There is both an armor scheme and armor classes. So there's several different classes of armor. You have SDS, which stands for Special Treatment Steel. This is the weakest. You'll generally find this in stuff like destroyers and smaller, like this guy, for example, made of mainly SDS. Then you have Class 1. This will comprise your cruisers mainly. And Class 2. Class 2 is generally used for either armor belts on cruisers that are large, that is, and battleships. These are not the only classes of armor, but these are the main ones. There are other classes of armor called Class 1.5 and Class 2.5. You might know about Class 2.5 because it's obsidian. It's what you have to use to make boilers. And these things all have different weights and different costs. SDS is the cheapest. Class 1 is twice as expensive as SDS, but also gives you significantly better protection. And the same goes for Class 2. Each one is a step up on the scale. And when it comes to armoring your ships, I already said you'll see SDS on DDs and stuff like that. You gotta understand that the weight does matter. It's what keeps your displacement. A DD might not have enough air to put a Class 1 belt on. It's just probably not going to have that. Most DDs didn't even have a belt. You might be able to fit it in the magazines to protect your ammo. So these all have different uses. The SDS, of course, is one of the most common things you'll ever use. Class 1 you can also use in protecting vitals on certain ships. Let's say you have like a light cruiser, but you want it to be made out of SDS because it had really weak armor historically. Well, then you put this around the magazines and the boilers to prevent explosions. Let's say you have a heavy cruiser, and it has a really thick belt, but a normal rest of the ship. Well, you go Class 2 belt. That's just how it goes. I have a rule of thumb. SDS isn't for anything with light armor. Class 1 is basically like 50 millimeters. And Class 2 is about 100 millimeters of armor. So that's a good way to judge stuff off of. Now with that done, you have the complexities of making a armor scheme. So armor schemes can be a lot different comparing on what you're trying to accomplish. Let's say I want my ship to be very survivable, and I don't care how much engine space I take up. Because these things right here are part of the armor scheme. They're specifically to protect from torpedoes. Space is what helps kill a torpedo. What I mean by that is you might have an explosion go off here, but because there's space between this wall this wall might not be damaged. Or it might be damaged, but still survive. And torpedo protection can really take up a lot of space. So this would be the engine space. Let's say this is the biggest part of the ship, and this is the engine space. Well, I have a certain amount of width because of this torpedo protection. Even then, it might not be the most effective. Good ways to stop torpedoes is air and sometimes layering. So if you want to layer, we're going to delete this side. And what we're going to do is spaced layered wall. And we're doing spaced layered because you still want that space to help fight off a torpedo. There is a general rule of thumb that I use. If the torpedo blister, like this area right here, that has just air, is skinnier than 2. And I generally don't do anything wider than 2. But if it's skinnier than 2, you can take off this wall. Because this right here is a lot more danger. If I just have it open, it's twice the amount of air. And let's say you have a bunch of flooding. That's twice the amount of the space that can flood. With this one wall, you don't really have to worry about that too much. Although it is nice to have a wall, like to have a deck in between. Not a deck, but yeah, that. Just to make it so the flooding's decreased. Although this does take up a bunch of air, which screws up buoyancy. But if you noticed, by doing that, I've taken up more space. I don't have as much engine room anymore. And that's bad, depending on what you're doing. If I want to make something slow and durable, I want to make it good at taking torpedoes specifically. We'll get up to armor belts up here, armor schemes up here later, but we're going over torpedoes first. Let's say I want to make it slow but durable. I don't really care about the machinery. I just want to make this thing as tough as possible. So the reason I'm also putting this up here is because ship torpedoes drop at a depth of 4. And let's say this is the water line, this black line right here. You're hitting about here. So you want your wall right here. It's more effective. Because if I just put it right there, I'm blowing out 2 compartments at one. If I'm putting it right here, this compartment up here might survive, and you have the air to tank it better. So that's my reasoning on that. So let's say I just want something slow and can tank a lot of torpedoes. I get this little tiny area to actually tank the torpedoes, right? To actually put my machinery in, but you're also more survivable, and you can do it the other way around if you want. You could do like the one wall there and then the 2. That actually might be more effective in this case by splitting both hatches, both areas of the blister into these separate little things, allowing you to have a bit more air. It's a little more air efficient, more buoyancy efficient to do it like that. So yeah, you have basically no space for machinery. It means the ship is probably going to be slow unless you make a super long power plant, but that's going to take up a lot of space. So it's really a gamble on what kind of protection you want. And how you place this right here is a gamble on where you think torpedoes are going to hit, because subs can change where their torpedoes hit on the, what is it? I think it's the y-axis, I could be wrong, but on the upwards axis, horizontal axis. The vertical axis, I'm sorry for screwing up so many times. Anyway, on the vertical axis, subs can select, so let's say you want to be protected against subs, and you think they're going to aim for 3 because, I don't know, they suspect your torpedo protection's weaker there. You can do something like that. It just depends on how you want to do it. But I do have a rule of never making these 3 high. It's just really dangerous. I think the only place that would be viable is a battleship because you have a lot of tonnage. You already have a lot of air. So it's not too much of a worry. So let's say I'm worried about taking a hit from a ship torpedo on a lightly armored ship. So we're going to keep this one the same. We're going to keep this side the same. This is the side we're going to constantly edit. So I want my lightly armored ship to be able to take torpedoes somewhat decently. But I want it to still be light. So the first thing I would like to do is get rid of this. I will replace it with a weaker STS. This is underwater protection. I'm more worried about shells hitting up here, which I'm going to replace this for Class 1, because again, I want this to be light. Let's say I just have this there for weight saving, even though this could be a risk, because sometimes shells, there's something called soft corners, and a soft corner basically causes a shell to go through a gap in the blocks. There's like a minuscule gap. So let's say I want to lighten this armor a lot. I just want to be able to take shells. And I don't really care. I just want to be able to tank shells in this area. I don't really care about getting hit down here with its shell, but I still want decent torpedo protection that can provide me a good amount of machinery space. So I do something like this. And you're mainly, let's say you're mainly worried about subs. So if you want to worry about subs, I lost my black, so sorry. But you want to worry about subs. Right here. You could either keep this big and open, or you could still just go with the safety. Oh, they might aim lower because it might do more damage kind of thing. Another part of armor that you don't see in this cutout, but I can make real quickly, is compartmentalization. So, I have another rule of thumb here. My rule of thumb is this should be no wider than 5. So if it comes here, I don't want it any wider than this. Because what you're going to have, you're just going to have this big space that can fill with water. So you get 5, that's it. And you put some walls. You make compartments to take in water. So if this gets breached, the rest of the ship is not going to be breached with water. It's going to be fine. The rest is not going to flood. Only this little area is. And that's important. You make your own rules on it. I go 5 wide, no more. Unless, again, battleships are a lot different. So there's another way to stop torpedoes. You can use pure armor to stop torpedoes. They won't do it as well, but you can. So I want to make this ship really durable. I want to make this thing like really tough. I do care about speed. I don't want to compromise speed. And that's just how it is. There's a couple ways you can do that. Let's say I want to make this... I don't care about my other walls getting damaged. So I make it a skinnier one. That has more layers, so that wall might get damaged, but this one's fine. It's not even touched, let's say. The one protecting your machinery. And then I want to make that so I don't take much damage from shelling. From here, all the way up to here, the same. I add a belt. Now make it out of Class 2. Then I layer the back for Class 1. So you might see this on little battle, like very lightly armed battle cruisers. Not lightly armed, but armored battle cruisers. You might see something like this as a scheme, where you still want that protection. You don't want too much protection, because you're not doing battleship. The Class 2 thick armor, you know. So you just throw this in. Specifically right here. So that area is now pretty durable. It's not going to take much damage from cruisers, that is. But I still want my machinery space to be extra safe. So your biggest worry, let's add a floor to the machinery space. It's going to be kind of short, but this is assuming you have a whole bottom like this where it's raised. But I want this machinery space to be safe. My boilers are in here. They're possibly the most explosive thing on the ship. So you can throw a Class 2 layer armor in here. And again, this is like a battle cruiser kind of thing. This isn't like anything lighter. And there you go. You have a lot of safety from plunging fire. This will come here. Nothing will clip through here. Nothing will clip through here. It's just gonna hit and bam. Or it's gonna come through here, hit, bam, hit this too, come down, hit this. Generally, you're gonna be safe with this kind of layout. Now you don't need this to be super strong. You don't need this layer to be super strong, but you do need this layer to be strong because it's what contains your engines and your boilers, and your boilers can explode when exposed to water. So I'm gonna make a completely off-the-cuff armor scheme, and we're gonna say it's for a light cruiser. So we come over here. I'm just gonna make this skinny. It's not gonna be as wide as this one. I also want to have a more... We'll learn about this later, but fluid dynamic hull. When we're talking about hull building, we'll go into this. And I think the next thing I'm going to touch up on is not hull building. I think the next thing I'm going to touch up on will probably have to do with setting up machinery spaces, or not setting them up, but the other things you put in machinery spaces, like the auxiliaries. Because auxiliaries do matter. So we come over here, SDS. And let's say I want to make it a little taller. No particular reason, just a little taller. Sometimes boats are like this. So we have a deck right here. I want to make this thing, because it's a light cruiser, it shouldn't have the best torpedo protection. It should have some, but it doesn't need a super like complex one, like this kind of stuff, or this kind of armor with also a belt that specifically is designed to take a shell below the waterline. It doesn't need all that. Screw that up, actually. It's supposed to be like that. But yeah, this is not going to be one of those things. So we're just going to do a 2-layer. These are good at taking torpedoes. They take up a lot of space is the issue. So how do I make this more efficient? Well, again, we established that torpedoes generally come from a lower area of the ship. They usually hit a 4. With this thing's draft, it would be right here. So how am I going to prevent that? How can I prevent that while also making an effective armor belt and making it light, having air so I can be buoyant? Well, that works right there, but on specifically when it comes to light cruisers, there's a little trick you can do. This is something I do on some of my ships, and it's distributed armor. With distributed armor, I mean armor that's in certain places for certain risks. So like this belt, for example, is distributed armor. It prevents shells from coming in. It's distributed in a certain way so that it only really stops shells. It's not meant to stop anything else. And it's distributed there to protect a specific area of the ship. So let's say I just want to protect my engine rooms. From fire. Not fire, but let's say I want to protect them from specifically torpedoes. So this would be the issue right here, this area right here. So what we're going to do is to keep this thing light, we're going to add this. I'm more worried about torpedoes than anything, so I need to worry about the explosion. So that right there, while it's not the best protection ever, especially when you get up to here, and let's say you find a sub that decides it wants to poke a hole through here, and it's not really going to stop any shells that might hit the water line or hit a little blower that might travel through, but it will stop your torpedoes. And you really have to consider all these things. Like, on a destroyer, for example, let's make just... We'll put it right here. We'll make it 1. So on a destroyer, you're not going to get something super wide, so let's go... Where's the center one? It should be right there. Something like... just making sure I do my math right. From here to here, that's 13, yeah. So you got a destroyer with a water line of about 4. I'll go 5. We'll go 5. I care a lot about my interior space. On a destroyer, interior space means a lot. I don't have much interior space. I don't actually have much space for torpedo protection, and I don't really need it. It's not worth the effort to put extensive torpedo protection on a destroyer. So how do I do that? How do I make something the nice, safe something that's at least decently protected? It might take a torpedo hit or 2. Well, you can do the basic way of doing it. With destroyers, big, long ones are okay. Big, long torpedo belts are okay because you're not really... If you're hit by a torpedo, you're probably going to get hit. You're probably screwed up in more way than one. So you can do that kind of belt. Very basic. You notice it cuts into here because most of this space, most of your machinery space, you're only going to have torpedo protection around around the machinery space in a destroyer anyway, but that's if it has torpedo protection, that is. But yeah, it's gonna take up the entire upwards of the ship. It's not gonna just sit there and take up like no space. They take a lot of space to fit. And the other option is just doing layered protection. I mean, it won't be as defensive. Well, it's not going to be as good at protecting you from torpedoes, but it will stop shells. And it will prevent a little more damage from torpedoes. So, that's it for today. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about well, I already said auxiliaries. We're going to probably do that in this space over here, since there's a little space here still. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. I'll see you tomorrow with the next video. Bye. Alright, guys. Today, we're back. Alright, guys. Why did it fucking stop? Oh my god.